Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Joelle Simone Anthony. I am also known as the Grave Woman, and this week in this installment of Death at the Movies, we will be discussing Madea, A Family Funeral. I just really don't know what to say. I feel as if there were so many opportunities in this film to go a lot deeper. And I was disappointed that the writers and producers of this film did not take the opportunity to express the sacredness, the culture, the history, and the power behind the African American funeral planning and homegoing service as a whole in a more positive light. There were scenes in the movie that disgusted me as a funeral professional that were intended, and I completely understand that they were intended to be humorous in the film. And one of the scenes in particular is the scene where Madea and her cohorts are visiting the funeral home for a viewing in place of the grieving widow in the film. And in this scene, because of the manner of death, the writers chose to portray that the deceased penis was erect, and because of that, the casket wouldn't remain closed. And that in itself, you know, it was humorous to an extent. But the funeral director in the film says to Madea and her friends that in order to close the casket correctly, they could possibly cut off his penis. That to me was disgusting. And it was disgusting because a lot of times people base their perceptions of what happens in the funeral home and in the funeral service industry on what they see in the media, because a lot of times the general public does not have access to our processes and procedures, especially in the embalming room. And that offended me because never under any circumstances would any funeral director who has any type of professional training or just common sense about themselves express to a family that in order to properly close a casket, a deceased penis or any other part of their body would have to be removed. I feel like that was very low-hanging fruit that did not have to be put in the film. Another thing that irritated me was the depiction of, you know, the length of the African American homegoing service. Again, I understand that it was intended to be humorous, but there's a reason that the funerals are so long. And it's not just with African American funerals that this takes place. Now, one thing that they did get right, which I thought was extremely hilarious, was the expression and just the irritation of the funeral director that was hanging around outside of the funeral. Like, man, guys, come on, let's wrap this thing up already. And I don't know the exact time that they were in the church, but it was a very long time. So that part was understandably humorous, and it kind of was a bit on the nose, but it was funny. I feel as if Mr. Perry and his production team and writers could have taken a more in-depth look at the circumstances and the nuances of the relationships of the family that they portrayed in the film. By this, I'm referring to the monologue that the mother gave at the end of the movie, where she was basically scolding her children for behaving the way that they did. And she expressed that, you know, they may view her as a weak woman, but in reality, she was very strong because she stayed with a man who provided very well for his family, though he had external relationships. And part of the whole funeral theme was the Papa was a Rolling Stone thing, which, you know, it happens not only in black families, but with families of all color. It happened in my family. You know, someone passes away and you find out about other children or other women. It happens, but it was done to the extreme in this film, and I just didn't think it was funny. I learned a word from the friend who attended the movie with me, and the word that she taught me was pandering. And pandering is basically dumbing down your intelligence or dumbing down what you're presenting to someone else so that it can entertain a certain group of people. And Tyler Perry's demographic is predominantly Christian church going African Americans. And because of the trauma of grief, and because African Americans and Christians turn to the church, and because they are able to feel comfortable going to his films, I feel like there was such an opportunity to speak to the need for conversations about death and dying in our community, and about grief in our community, and about just maybe counseling or exploring the demographics that led up to, not the demographics, exploring the relationships that led up to the discord amongst the family that the movie was centered around. The mother, back to the monologue that the mother gave, the mother was basically saying, you know, to one son, I think his name was Jesse, that you were so desperate for the relationship with your father that you went out and found a woman just like him. And that to me stated that Jesse was experiencing grief prior to his father's death. All of his children were. And I just felt like there was so much more opportunity to present a more positive, a more healing, and a more accurate depiction of the grieving process and the funeral planning process as a whole. So I'm not going to spend any more time ranting about this film. I just wanted to express my honest opinion because so many people have requested that I do a review of this film. Again, all the opinions are expressed in this video are my own and my own alone. And I'm not trying to bash Tyler Perry or his writers or his production team, but I have to be honest in how I felt about the movie and about the storyline as a whole. My name is Joelle Simone Anthony. I'm also known as The Grave Woman. Feel free to visit my website, www.thegravewoman.com. Live life, love hard, and I'll talk to you next time.